things are not simple, they're complex. So
Right.
that's
Right.
that's the main thing that I talk about. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm
So
with you. I definitely don't want to get too literal. All right, amazing. Welcome to the PredictIt podcast. Our guest today is Dr. Laurence Hillman, one of the world's leading voices in archetypal astrology. Hillman, who has been immersed in archetypes since the age of 16, if I've got that right there,
that is right.
uh, holds a PhD in psychology with a focus in transformative leadership, co-creator of Archetypes at Work, author of Planets in Play, Alignments. He's lectured everywhere from the Globe Theatre in London to Washington Heights in New York to Pacific Graduate Institute. You're fluent in 5 languages. You've traveled to over 40 countries. You live primarily in St. Louis. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
Amazing. I went to Wash U, so
Oh,
we
you
have
did? No.
something in
Oh,
common. Yes,
my
yes,
alma
yes.
mater for some of my education. Yes, good school.
Love it. Love it. We can discuss that, but welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being on, Dr. Hillman. Really appreciate it. I would love to get into the deep weeds, but let's just cover the bases for our listeners. I want to talk a little bit more about archetypal astrology as a whole. But are you looking at astrology as a prediction or pattern recognition? Recognition. You talk a lot about understanding the why and meaning making. So just give us a good overview.
Thanks, Jacob, and please call me Lawrence. So, you know, I don't believe you can predict the future. So I'll just start by saying that as an astrologer, many might disagree with me, other astrologers or people who believe you can. I don't think you can because I believe in free will. And if we had free will, then we can't, we don't know what's going to happen. So, but I also want to think about the psychology of prediction. We have in America a thing I call prediction addiction. We want to know what's the stock market going to do. People are paid massive amounts of money to make these predictions. What will interest rates do? What are the fashion trends for the fall? March Madness. Think about that. I'm going to predict who's going to win. Massive amounts of money and craziness. And just look at the fast expanding, gambling market online right now, which is
Yep.
insane. So people are so obsessed with, making predictions. When an astrologer comes in and says, I'm going to predict something, of course, they get nutty because that's not science. Or it's not speculation the way you speculate when you do March Madness. I have my own little technique and I'm going to win these kinds of things. But so here's the important difference. Astrology is a tool that measures the quality of time. What does that mean? Usually when we talk about time, we talk about quantity of time. I have a lot of time, I have little time. Those are quantitative statements. But quality of time means that every moment actually contains its own quality. And we say things like, I'm having a bad day or a good day, that kind of an idea. And if we believe that there is a certain kind of time, that we live in angry times right now, we live in divisive times right now, those are statements about the quality of time. Astrology reads the quality of time. And so it's a clock, if you want, for reading the quality of time. And if I want to know, what the quality is like of my life, I can look at the quality that I was born into of that moment, because that's a moment in time. And if I believe in the acorn theory that, the acorn contains the oak tree, then that will unfold over the rest of my life according to the quality of the moment that was there. Now, I do have free will in how things unfold. And there's going to be all kinds of things that happen on the way that we don't know. But there's an archetypal natural unfolding for us all. And that's what I'm interested in. What are those patterns? What are those stories? It's a way to go through life to align myself the best with what I'm naturally already meant to do.
That's a great intro, and I love the quality of time aspect here. And let's just take a look at some of your writings and lectures through time. I read Millennial Archetypes, your 1999 lecture, which was very optimistic generally, pre 9/11. Then I read what is very similar, but just written, I think, at a different time, The Age of Aquarius, an introduction. And that seems a more post 9/11 outlook on the Age of Aquarius. And then your November 9th, 2016, A Few Thoughts About the Election essay, which was illuminative. And then your essay in COVID. And it seems like you're getting less optimistic over time. But I'd love to know, like, what has the Aquarian age actually delivered? What what do acts 4 and 5 look like, and how have you changed over the years?
Thanks. Great question. So, reading the article about the election, which is now, almost 10 years old, I still feel it's true in many ways. I didn't talk about what would happen, but there was an optimistic tone about, not looking at the election as a dyadic event, but as an emergence of something new. That how sort of the dyadic system of, for me or against me, or, Republican, Democrat, these kinds of ideas don't really, they're dyadic, so they're limited, and they don't really work anymore in a modern world of complexity where we have more than two of everything. And so even genders. And so it's a time, where I spoke about the collapse in the trust in institutions, the exhaustion with the two-party system, the rise of spectacle, the emergence of outsider energies, these kinds of things. And what feels different 10 years later for me is not my relationship to breakdown itself, because I think that's what's happening at the end of an era, because it's the end of, from an astrology perspective, it's the end of the era of Pisces and the beginning of the era of Aquarius. I remain optimistic, but I no longer assume that every breakdown leads to a breakthrough immediately. And some breakdowns simply remain as a breakdown. That's over, it's dead, it's died, it's no longer necessary. But, and systems are continuing to fragment, further than anything that we've ever seen before. And I think we're still inside that transition. So I'm a little bit disappointed at the speed, but I also understand that this reset, as many are calling it, many are talking about a 30-year reset between 2020 and 2050. And if that's the case, it certainly seems to be the case, then we need to be more patient. We need to be more participatory in deciding what kind of a future we want and so on. It's not a one-time event, but these things take a long time. I just spent some time in Florence, a couple of weeks, and I was thinking a lot about the Renaissance and that sort of breakthrough, and how amazing it must have been to be alive then, and to notice how the whole world changed and all the worldviews changed. But it didn't happen overnight. But many, many things changed in the belief systems coming out of the Middle Ages into the Renaissance. Was a massive shift in consciousness all over the world. And Florence, in many ways, was sort of at the forefront of that, with many of its thinkers and artists and creators. And so the key is still that we're still searching for the third beyond the current binaries. We have not found it yet. So we're still thinking you're with me or against me, or it's black or white. It's left or right, these kinds of things. And that's too limited. We need something new. And it's going to take a while for that to emerge. So clearly, to me, the current political situation is just a massive sort of, it's like the head of the dragon has been cut off, and the dragon is still, whacking its tail around and causing a whole lot of destruction but the death throes are there of the old system and of old political monsters, and many can clearly see them, but we don't have an alternative yet. We don't have a new way forward, because it's not time yet. We're not ready yet as a human species. We're still holding on to the old system. We're still fighting within that dyadic thinking. So this is taking longer than I thought. I was quite optimistic then. I'm still very optimistic about that we get through this and that humanity will survive, and that despite all the doom scrolling and the naysayers and all the fear that's out there, this is common when new eras break in. As Joseph Campbell once said, every new era comes in with violence, which is what we're seeing as well. This is not old ways don't go away quietly. It takes violence, unfortunately, and lots of suffering and a lot of pain. And it's a difficult time to be alive, but also we are part of something extraordinary, and we can all participate in our own ways and really make a difference for where we're going collectively. This is a time where your voice matters more than ever before, just because new things are emerging. If you have an idea that hasn't been heard, with Uranus having gone into Gemini, I'm really interested in new ideas we haven't heard yet, not rehashing of old ideas, something really new. And they'll be coming. You'll be seeing them. I am excited about, just because that's the quality of the moment. So I'm not predicting we're going to see new things. I'm talking about the quality of the moment invites new ideas. And so that's what I expect, which now starts to tell you what archetypal forecasting is about. It describes the kind of time that is, and then we can think about the things can be expected then, which is not the same as predicting, but it's forecasting. Predicting will be saying these things are going to happen. Forecasting is saying time is right for such things to emerge, and then we can be curious and start seeing where they do. For instance, if in a personal situation, if I told somebody, it's going to rain in your life in April next year, then that's something I can see. That's a forecast. It's a lot like weather. Now, if you go out and jump around in the puddles because you love the rain, or if you go and hide your head under your duvet until the rain is over, that's free will. That's what you're going to do with it. I don't know. So I can't predict what's going to happen for you, but I can tell you the circumstances of your environment if you want. And so if you're going to, plant a garden, maybe don't do it in April is kind of the idea.
Your patience is really admirable, and I love your your disgust with the binary is so ironic because we'll get into some of the predicted markets that we have, and all the markets are yes or no binaries, right? They're
Exactly.
all kind of it
Yeah,
will land here or there, but we do live in the gray until the market is actually settled.
right.
So
And
that
what's interesting,
forecast thought process is
thank
there.
you. Yeah, absolutely. And the it's so interesting because everything is going digital and digital is binary. And so how to get into non binary thinking using a binary tool is really interesting to me. And that's where AI really gets interesting and can despite its own way of thinking in a binary way, can actually think in massively complex ways, which is quite extraordinary. So yeah.
Absolutely. So, you were touching on this is the time for new ideas, and I know that's the renegade archetype. Correct me if I'm
Mhm.
wrong.
Yeah.
That you're looking for in everyone. I just want to kind of give a quick overview of maybe the archetypes that the President of the United States exhibits. You talk a lot about how people are different way at work as they are at home, different way in front of audiences. Bill Maher, after meeting the president in person, said he isn't a crazy man. He just plays one on TV. And you can see his Truth Social profile doesn't necessarily match his actions always. How do you read into the multiple sides or archetypes of President Trump, and how does that influence our foreign, domestic policy long term?
So one of the great mistakes that people make is to assume that anybody, particularly public figures, are psychologically singular. He is like that, or she is like that. And that is just very limited because we're not. We're all complex, we're all multiple, we have lots of different sides. Now, I may not like all of the sides that are you, but to assume that somebody is simple and this is one thing is not true. Besides that, Trump, of course, is a Gemini, has extra multiple, Sun in Gemini has extra multiple sort of, sides. But yeah, and we know that, if you don't believe that's true, next time you have an argument with your significant other, and the phone rings and your boss is on the phone, we all know that we immediately become a different person. We literally contain these different inner archetypal figures that we become and step into in a moment. If you're in a dark alley and somebody walking down a dark alley at night and somebody jumps out and says, "Give me your wallet," you don't think about stepping into a warrior to survive, but you do. You automatically step into that part of yourself. We do this all the time, all day long. We step into different roles. I think of them as roles like on a stage. And we take on those roles depending on the situation, and the more awareness we have of these roles that we play and the more consciously we can step into them, the more we can actually benefit from their gifts and not feel sort of like, well, this just came over me and I don't know what happened, why I suddenly became furious and broke the window. We don't have to be like that. We can be much more aware of our inner figures and how they need to find voice. So the first thing about Trump is that, multiplicity, anybody, public figure, multiplicity, not singularity. And then we have to remember that modern media rewards amplification of certain archetypal traits become exaggerated because they generate attention, they generate fear, they generate excitement, outrage, or for many people, identification. Yes, he speaks for me. This is, my voice. And so that's what is being offered when we simplify and we single single amplify archetypes, which is exactly what the media does. I'm not blaming the media for his behavior. I'm saying that this is in our culture what makes it so easy to put a singular archetype on him, one that we then hate in ourselves or whatever else. It's a great surface for projection. And I wrote about that in my article as well. It's never about him. It's about what he does in us, what he activates in our own psyche. I don't find him that interesting. I find it interesting what he affects in people and how that activates in people and tells a lot about our social times. So, for example, we're different people if we're in front of television when I'm talking to you now, or if I'm having dinner with my friends, or
Mhm.
we're doing social media, or we're at a rally, or we're doing negotiations, or we're in private meetings. Each evoke different parts of us, or different parts of our inner lives, inner psyche, and they step forward according to our own patterns, which an astrologer can read in your natal chart. How those patterns look, how those characters look, how are they dressed, how do they act, are they gentle? Are they more aggressive? What kinds of characters are there? It's an interesting review of your inner life. So the danger, I think, becomes when the culture begins rewarding only one narrow band of archetypal expressions. For instance, performance, domination, outrage, or spectacle, which is kind of the time that we live in now. So unless it's spectacular, nobody shows up. People go to see Trump's rallies because, there's going to be something I can get excited about or scream about or point fingers at or get afraid about. And it's like a thrill. It's like going to a roller coaster. So these kinds of things. So that's where it gets dangerous in my mind. That kind of spectacle thing. It's not, that's. So those are my thoughts about it. It's never about him. It's about what we do with a figure like that. How society just eats it up because it's perfect timing. So a figure like him was necessary. I've said many times it could have been somebody else. He just happens to fit the part that we needed as a culture right now. That's what I wrote about 10 years ago. I think that's exceptionally true now. So what I see, the fact that he was reelected and the fact that he's in power now is even more nutty than he was before. Those kinds of things to me just means that we as a culture, as the American people, have simply not um, done the work that we were offered to do the first time around. So okay, we're not ready yet. Let's go back and do some more deconstruction and some more tearing apart of families, et cetera, because we haven't hit the bottom yet. I always think we've hit the bottom, and then I find out, oh no, it goes way further down. There's a lot to uproot in the American psyche, and that's being shown right now. A lot of hidden stuff that we don't want to talk about, slavery and rooting out of buffalo and slaying of the native peoples, all these things is deeply in our psyche. And we carry that. And it's coming in a way, we're paying some of the price of the naivete and the youthfulness. There's something very youthful and naive about the American people. And I say that with great love. I'm an American myself, but I'm also European, and so grew up in Europe. And so to me, the difference of not having, thousands of years of heavy duty culture lying on top of you is both a freedom that America doesn't know what to do with, and also a responsibility that America doesn't know what to do with. And so that's where we have to do a lot of growing up and maturing as a culture. And I think this is part of it. Part of it is sort of getting slapped around a lot, which is what's happening now. It's unfortunate, but it's a painful transition, but it is very necessary.
Yeah, and you mentioned how America doesn't have to deal with the burden of thousands of years of history as we come upon our 250th birthday as a country. And I go to the Incan ruins and I think, how new is the country that I live in? And you
Mhm.
obviously feel that even more when you travel in Europe so often. So
Exactly.
I just wanted to acknowledge that. It's very interesting time right now. But if we look into forecasting and trying to get into pattern recognition and what might happen in the near future. People are asking about the midterms, or even PredictIt has a market up. Will Trump leave office early? Will he last to January of 2029? Right now he's at 44%. Yes, he will leave office early. So there are like longer term things that we're trying to forecast, shorter term things. I want to ask you about a pattern that Ben Meiselas on Twitter recognized. He mentioned basically Trump, I think, went bankrupt 6 times. It might be slightly different number, but it was basically pointing out that right now the situation in Iran and the situation in the Situation Room shows us why he might have gone bankrupt so many times. The tweet reads, "This guy is incapable of making a deal, meaningful decision. It follows the same cycle: big flashy announcement, that's epic fury. Adversity hits, which is the Hormuz closing. You're defrauding stakeholders, which is promise of a 2 week solution, which we see constantly. This new refresh of timeline: 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. Then a freeze up, again, rinse and repeat. So I'm curious, do you see that same pattern in Iran, in the Middle East, and maybe can that help us see a resolution in the near future?
I think Trump is a symptom of the United States. It's not about him. I'm not really interested in him and his behavior, like you just said. That's really interesting for some people to do, and I love the people that do it. That's fine. Focus on that. That's fine. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the American people that elects a guy like that, and that keeps, the big number of people, the millions of people who still think he's my guy, who still support that, who are in such denial about, such denial about something that they can't shake it off, that they can't admit, and so they'll continue to be split with their family. They don't know a way back. When I raised my kids, it was very important to give a kid an opportunity to start over. It's a really big gift to give the kids a start. You know what? Okay, so you messed up. You voted for this regime, and now let's start over. It's okay. You can come back to the fold. As we can start over, we can do things better, but we're not there yet. There's still tens of millions of people who vote for him and think he's fabulous. So, or the second coming of Christ or something nutty. I mean, these things are just really weird. So yeah, all the statistics and so forth, but, you know, um, it's more that the kinds of people that he surrounds himself with, the kinds of people that he's interested in are are have this renegade quality. They're anti-institutional, they're supposedly outsider energy. Outside of what? They're completely inside the rich and powerful, if you want. But performative authenticity, is something really important, that they act a certain way. They know how to raise their fist and point at the enemy, whoever the enemy is, brown people or poor people or shithole countries or whoever the other is. There's an othering of the day is a big part of that psyche. And, grievance is an identity there. And this is a really, really dangerous trend. And it's been done many times before. What's sad is that everything is so true and tested, and it just takes a little bit of education to find out that these things are not new, they're not original, they're proven ways of getting people to do what you want, they're proven ways of getting power. It's also it's a playbook, and the people still fall right into the playbook, and say, "Yep, I think that's all liberal, and that's therefore bad, and therefore it astonishes me." But it says a lot about the American psyche, because we're the ones who elected him. In Europe, people cannot understand why we did that, why we reelected him after we saw who he was. It's an extraordinary thing. So, we also have distrust of expertise is another kind of thing. So people who spend their whole life studying something, well, that's just, that's liberal. And so it's a shadow projection that is extraordinary, and from an archetypal perspective. All of these people that he surrounds himself with, they're almost exclusively men, and they all show a very strong, from an archetypal perspective, warrior and renegade amplification. So, yeah, the more warrior I do, the more I have tattoos and show my bare chest and thump my chest and use, Christian rhetoric from the Crusades to go out and kill people, the more I am a good soldier to follow Trump's lead. It's a very strange, but also very specific kind of a line. So it's a time of reckoning in many ways. So in the end, whether
Yeah.
candidates succeed or fail electoral, if you're talking about predictions or about forecasting in general, again, I won't predict anything, but I will say that whether candidates succeed or fail electorally is a revelation to us of what psychic energies are moving through the culture. And so we'll know if we're ready or not by the next election. Are we ready for the new thing, or we still haven't found it? So we go through more of this. That's basically to me what it's about. Elections to me are not contests of policy. Rather, I would call them contests of imagination. And Trump did brilliantly. What he's really good at, and what he's been able to capture, is the imagination of these MAGA people. So again, with fear and with images of decrepit people who are coming across the border, that triggers people in so many ways. And like, he really knows how to creep into people's imagination, and people who don't have any defenses or don't understand how their psyche works or don't have a lot of education. And some of them are very smart and just, thinking of their pocket or something like that. There's those as well, but in general, not very reflective, not very thought about, because their fears are being triggered. And so if you're afraid of something and you need an enemy, and you have grievance as an identity, it's the same trick that works really well over here. There's this very strong right-wing party in Sweden right now, and in many parts of Europe. It's a scary moment because just, tell me again, it's an old playbook. Tell me my enemies and I will go out and fight for you. And so we have to, as those of us who don't believe in the things that the 25 plan and Trump and so forth believe in, we have to activate the imagination for a different kind of a world, and that's not there. That was a big thing that Obama did. It was called hope at the time, and today that's a quaint word. But that was a big thing, that people actually had hope. That's an image in your mind. There's a future. There's something positive to work for. And he won. So he activated the imagination of the US people. And I think that's what we're lacking right now. There's not a lot of imagination because we're in a deconstructive time. So somebody who takes takes the reins at that time and promises things that are completely, just nutty, is going to be successful, which we saw.
Yeah. And you talk a lot about the imagination piece. I think the top of the ticket on the Democratic side has definitely struggled to be imaginative or capture the imagination of the American people. You certainly saw that with Hillary Clinton. You saw that Joe Biden actually, I think, got the useful evil that COVID was in 2020. And then once Joe Biden dropped out and Kamala Harris stepped in, she really struggled to reinvent that campaign and capture that imagination that Trump just constantly is pulling out of nowhere. So it's an interesting piece that you talk about. And that's where our part 1 interview with Laurence Hillman ends. Thanks so much for listening. Please tune in next week. We get into AI, aliens, we get deeper into astrology. So I ask them all the really tough questions in part 2. So please tune in and listen to the PredictIt podcast. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Jacob Studwell. Have a good one.